on the fighting portion. And if it's not the fighting portion, we focus on the protesting that the family and friends did to get the soldiers back. And if not that, it's the deaths that happened and just the terrible time of the era. What people forget to mention is the media and how they were involved in the Vietnam War. So it's first important to remember what the Vietnam War was about and how the people in the war felt. So the Vietnam War was the prolonged struggle between nationalist forces attempting to unify Vietnam under communist government and the U.S. attempting to prevent the spread of communism. Jennifer Rosenberg wrote an article questioning what the Vietnam War was about, and which could be found on about.com. And she also says that there was a lot of fighting in Vietnam before the Vietnam War started. But according to PBS.org, they put an exact date to it. So it was in 1945 when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs in Vietnam. The French were involved in the Vietnam War before the United States, but they suffered a defeat at Dien Bien Phu, where they opted out. And the United States decided to stay to help South Vietnam out and put them on their feet. Ultimately, it ended in 1973 for the United States when they agreed on a truce. And for the rest of the countries, it ended in 1975 when North Vietnam took Saigon, which is a country in South Vietnam, and the South Vietnam government fell. But what about the soldiers and the men in the military? How did they communicate and how did they feel? Based on an interview from Samantha Delaney on ProQuest.com, she interviewed her uncle Jimmy Delaney. And a question that stood out to me was, she asked him what angered him about the war. And what he said was his welcome home. He said he'd been fighting in the war for a whole bunch of years, and when he came back, it was a crowd of people, and they were all chanting like, woman killer, baby killer, and he just couldn't figure out why they were doing that. He was serving his time for his country, saw all this type of tragedy and all these kids dying, and he gets home and they're upset with him. So I couldn't understand why that happened. I also interviewed my dad, Kevin Jones, who was involved in the war, but not as involved as Jimmy Delaney. So my dad served as an Air Force veteran or soldier for about 4 years, and he had a lot to say about the war. I first asked him if he chose to serve in the war, and he said that he did. He said he saw from TV all the live fighting, and he saw that a lot of Americans were dying, so he chose, instead of sitting on the couch watching, to do something about it. He left with a lot of his friends from his neighborhood in the Bronx, and his one friend, Alfonso. They both went to the Air Force, but everyone else went to go as a soldier, and unfortunately some of them didn't come back, but him and Alfonso did, thankfully. His job description, he was a mechanic for the fighting planes, so he made sure everything was okay with the planes before they went out to war. And his base was in Thailand, so he wasn't exactly in Vietnam, but still part of the war. He didn't like speaking to his family because it made him really homesick, so he'd rather just stay, do his time, it sounds like jail, but do his time and then come back and be with his family. And he said that one really good source of communication was a newspaper called The Stars and Stripes. And he said that everybody in the military read it, and it had a whole bunch of news about how America was doing. I asked him what he felt like when he got home and if there was going to be jobs and stuff. And unfortunately, the times that he lived in, it was still kind of racism going on, so they wasn't looking for African-American people. So he was kind of disappointed about that. And lastly, I asked my dad, did he feel honored to be in the service? And he said, I am an Air Force veteran. I'm supposed to be honored. I am a hero. And I really like that quote because, of course, I look up to my dad, but never in the sense of him being a hero, and that if he walks down the street with his little veteran hat, people are going to salute him. So kind of proud of being, the daughter. Right. We've heard about the war, what it was about, and how people in the war felt. But we still don't know about the media. So there was good media and bad media. Like I said, America hated the soldiers from what they saw on TV. But as we all know, everything you see on TV isn't 100% true. As said by Eric McLaughlin of warbidforum.com, the horrors of the war entered the living rooms of Americans. For almost decades, in between school, work, dinners, you could see villages being destroyed, children dying, and American body bags being sent home. And I can only imagine how horrible that is for families to watch that, and they have people in the military and not that much choice of communication, so that's pretty scary. But there was a good side of media, and that was what the soldiers said. We have to keep the soldiers, happy, even though they're killing people. We have to keep their spirits up. So, of course, they watch sports, basketball games, the Olympics, stuff like that. And they had the newspaper, like my father referred to, and they just had music and each other to keep their spirits up. So, as you can see, the media had a huge influence and involvement without people really knowing about it. With learning about the opinions of the war, how the soldiers felt, we now can tell how much Vietnam had on American history. We can also identify the growth of media in America and the growth of media in the Vietnam War.